Hello everyone! I'm here again with 5 more Next Fest Metroidvania demos to review. First up is... AWAKEN Astral Blade. Right off the bat, I want to say that I think this game can be fun, but it's not my cup of tea. The combat here is the selling point. There's a combo system, which is pretty enjoyable. Combos feel useful without being overly complicated. You do a certain number of basic attacks, and then hit X to use a combo move. The type of move is determined by how many basic attacks you use, and whether you're on the ground or in the air. These combos will deal damage in an area of effect, and much higher damage than regular attacks. The animations take longer to finish, so you do have to be careful about your timing. This system works well. The combo moves are very effective, so it's fun to learn which moves work best for each situation, and set yourself up to use them effectively. The basic enemies are not too difficult. The main character has a decent amount of health, and 3 potions for healing. You can save, upgrade your attacks, heal, and replenish your potions at rest areas. The first mini-boss is this scorpion monster, who I was able to defeat pretty easily. I wasn't even attacking his weak spot, and I still just ripped through his health very quickly. The first real boss increases the difficulty significantly. Once I figured out the best method for attacking his weak spot, and learned his moveset, I was able to defeat him. But it turns out he has a second phase! Yeah, this was way more difficult than anything else in the demo so far. To the point where the game kept pestering me to decrease the difficulty. Oh, fuck off. I got close to killing it at some points, but eventually I just gave in and I did decrease the difficulty to my eternal shame. Some hardcore Metroidvania fans may enjoy the high difficulty of this boss, but it will probably be too much for casual fans, so be warned. On the art and story side of things, it's a mixed bag. The art is pretty nice, but I wasn't that interested in the story. The dialogue is pretty unnatural, which is not helped by the bad translation. Stop pretending you care, us. We encountered a big guy who almost killed us all. Not a big guy. On top of that, most of the dialogue is exposition, and I can't control the text speed. The text boxes disappear pretty quickly, and that combined with the awkward phrasing and made-up sci-fi terms meant that I ended up missing a lot of information. The gist of the story is that Tanya is a bionic, sent by her father to investigate a source of Carpus energy. The energy is mutating the plants and animals in the region into monsters. There was a team sent ahead to investigate, but they were attacked by a big guy and trapped. I don't care, but I will help you find them. Back on the more positive side of things, the movement is fine. Tanya starts out with a dash and gains a double jump pretty early on. It feels fine, though if I had to nitpick, I think the fall speed is a bit fast. Exploration is decent. There are plenty of little power-ups to find, and I can see obstacles that we will be able to open up in the future once Tanya gains more abilities. Now on to my more nitpicky complaints. The UI and UX are very unpolished. A lot of the game's tutorials pop up at weird times. Like, by the time I got a tutorial on these glowing plants, I've already seen them multiple times and figured them out for myself. The map tutorial pops up 15 minutes into the game and has the wrong button prompt. It says that you open the map with the arrow keys, but you actually open it with tab. Tanya's movement is controlled with the arrow keys, but the map is controlled with WASD, which was just a bit jarring. There are also a lot of capitalization mistakes, which are most likely an issue with the translation. If this combat system seems interesting to you, and you aren't bothered by a bit of UI jank and messy dialogue, then go for it. It's not my taste, but the gameplay is fun enough, and I can see it being a good time for players who are interested in a challenge. Emberbane. I feel kind of bad for this one. It had a Kickstarter last November that did fairly well, and a lot of people were looking forward to it. The elemental combat system caught a lot of people's attention. The game looks good and has some decent ideas, but it suffers a death by 1,000 nitpicks. There are a ton of small problems here that really pile up to suck the joy out of the fun parts. Luckily, the developers have heard all the feedback and made a very good write-up on how they're going to improve the game, which I'll link in the description. That being said, I'll still make this review based on my experience with the demo, flaws and all. Even if all these problems end up fixed, which I hope they do, I think it's interesting as a piece of the game's history and a good learning lesson for other aspiring developers. So I started the game, and right off the bat, the controls suck. I know you guys want me to play on a controller, and I accept that the controls on mouse and keyboard will sometimes be janky, but at least let me change my keybinds. UKO? Really? Why not UIO at least? On top of that, the first time I got the fire dash, I actually missed which key activated it. Wait, what was the button again? Since there are no keybinds or controls in the menu, I had no way to check which key it was bound to, so I had to pause my recording and check the video in order to figure it out. The audio mixing is also kind of a mess. Everything is very loud. I had to bring the music way down for it to be comfortable, and the sound effects slider didn't seem to actually do anything.
So, it begins.
There are also multiple just audio glitches.
Impressive.
The story feels half-baked. You really need to read the Kickstarter page to understand it, and even then we don't get a lot of explanation. Oh, okay. What was that? What was that about? You play as Ophelia, a fire sage who has been cast out from their village for some unknown reason, and is on a revenge quest for some unknown reason. It's all well and good to leave some mysteries to be uncovered, but I would like to have some idea of my player character's motivation. It's also a bit strange that Ophelia is cast out and thrown into a pit, which then leads to a very nice, pretty forest. Like, I know there are bandits out here, but really it's not so bad. Just set up camp and chill with this guy, he seems cool. Exploration-wise, this game is pretty linear. In its current state, I would class it as more of an action platformer than a Metroidvania. As you progress, there are puzzles and platforming challenges that require you to utilize the abilities you find on your journey. The platforming was fine for the most part, though I do think that obstacles like spike pits should respawn the player on a safe platform the way that acid does. Getting out of spike pits is just kind of annoying and unnecessary. I'm also not a big fan of these wrecking balls. In a 2D platformer, having an obstacle that moves forwards and backwards in third-dimensional space is just kind of awkward. I think one way to improve it would be to change the animation slightly. When the wrecking ball reaches the back wall, it lets out this white flash. I think it would be better if that white flash happened in the middle of the wrecking ball's swing, so that there's a more clear indication of the timing. The puzzles were straightforward and pretty easy for the most part, except for this one. I think this puzzle might be bugged. I thought what I needed to do was light every torch using my different fire abilities, but the timing is super unforgiving. Eventually the door just opens seemingly on its own, and I still don't know why. Movement is finicky. Wall jumps propel the player more horizontally than vertically, which takes some getting used to. It's not necessarily a problem, but I think mantling should be more forgiving to account for the lack of vertical movement. Platforming is also pretty annoying when all of the enemies have significant knockback. You'll sometimes finish a whole platforming section, and then get immediately knocked off of a platform by an enemy, and have to redo the whole thing again. You get a fire dash later on, and it is quite touchy. It has significant input lag, which wasn't a problem for any of the other abilities. I also sometimes felt like I had to hit it twice for it to work. Also, the key binding for it is odd. It doesn't replace the normal dodge. Instead, it's mapped to the same button as the fireball. This means you can only dash while in the air, and only shoot fireballs when you're on the ground. That just feels limiting as a control scheme, and makes fire dash difficult to use in combat. I would guess they're going for a system where each button is mapped to a specific elemental magic, but I think the dash would work better as an upgrade to the basic dodge. Combat is okay, but the contact damage kills it. Ophelia's dodge roll is pretty short, which, when combined with knockback, makes dodging through enemies quite difficult. You can dodge away from enemies, but to me that feels like it kills the pacing of the combat. With larger enemies like the first boss, it's difficult to get around them at all without being hit, because they're too tall to jump over and too wide to dodge through unless they're running. This is especially a problem with the first boss, because his moveset is designed in such a way that you really don't want to get cornered. Contact damage was apparently a fairly last-minute addition to the demo, and is being removed, which I think will improve combat significantly. On the art side of things, I don't have any big complaints. It holds up pretty well. I do suggest making the save points more obvious. They replenish your health and potions, but it took me a while to figure out that they were doing anything at all, because there's barely any indication that something is happening. This little circle lights up, but a more noticeable noise and animation combo would work better in my opinion. Other than that, the visuals work fine. Despite all of its flaws, I am glad the developers put this up. While this version of the game probably would have worked better as a beta test than a demo, it is an effective demonstration of the power of playtesting. Whenever you make a product, there will always be problems that the creators won't even realize are there until the public gets a hold of it. Since developers know the quote-unquote correct way to play their game, it's impossible for them to replicate the experience that players will have going in blind. That's why testing your game with real players is so important. If you're interested in game dev like me, I highly recommend this video, which I'll link in the description. It's a really interesting look at how smart playtesting can take a game from frustrating to great. These developers have a lot of work ahead of them before this game is ready to ship, but for their sake and the sake of the Kickstarter backers, I hope they manage it. Kingsgrave. This one is nice. It's simple but fun. You play as a deceased king who has been resurrected by a strange spirit woman for unknown reasons. Your kingdom has been devastated by a plague, and your goal is to find materials and survivors with which to rebuild. Reconstructed buildings provide new abilities, which can either help you unlock new areas or assist you in combat. While the map layout is more exploratory, progression is fairly straightforward. You typically are able to get exactly the resources you need for each new milestone. There are simple puzzles to solve in order to progress. There are more of those old school shoot the switch or put the block on the pressure plate type puzzles, but they're fine. For combat, you start with a basic attack and a dash. You also gain a crossbow for ranged attacks. Enemies will attack you with either melee projectiles or they'll just explode in your face. There wasn't a boss in the demo, instead there was a sort of challenge run where enemies came in waves. From reading the Steam page, I'm not sure if there are going to be bosses. Maybe a final boss, but we need the full game to know for sure. Story-wise, I think it does a good job of being mostly uncomplicated with a little bit of mystery sprinkled in. The king doesn't know why he's been resurrected or who this spirit woman is, but his basic motivation is very straightforward. He wants to rebuild his kingdom. Most of the townspeople you save are generic NPCs, besides the cartographer Earl, who recognizes the king and explains more of what happened in the past 50 years. It seems that the plague is being caused by some nefarious person or thing, and we'll need to put a stop to it in the process of rebuilding. I think this is a good one to pick up if you're interested in a more casual experience. It's not anything groundbreaking, just a simple, old-school, fun experience. There's enough exploration and progression to keep it entertaining, but it feels straightforward enough that you could play it for an hour every week or two without getting lost. If that's something you're looking for, give it a shot. Magical Delicacy. Okay, I like this game, but despite the Steam tags, it is not a Metroidvania. It's a cozy cooking game with exploration and some light platforming. You do unlock movement abilities like a double jump, but there's no combat, so if you're looking for a true Metroidvania, this one's not it. I'll still review it in full though, mainly because I did have a good time with it. You play as Flora, a young witch who has just moved into the harbor town Grat to learn more about magic and open up her own shop. You can make meals, potions, pastries, and tea to sell to the townsfolk. If that premise gave you Kiki's Delivery Service vibes, then you are correct. The town and characters really channel that friendly, whimsical tone. The story starts picking up more at the end of the demo when you encounter your first real witches. They immediately get you involved in their personal beef. Cassia here gives you an egg and tells you to keep it safe from Tano. In exchange, she agrees to teach you some magic and gives you the ability to double jump. The demo ends just as you're about to cross the bridge into the next area. The gameplay is fun. To get customers, you need to go around town and talk to NPCs. They'll tell you what they want, and you go back to your shop to make a meal that suits their tastes. Then you bring it back to them, and they'll reward you based on how good the meal was and whether it matched what they wanted. In order to increase the amount and quality of items that you can make, you need to collect ingredients, recipes, and tools to expand your kitchen. You can find ingredients while exploring, buy them from vendors, or plant them in your yard to collect later. Recipes and kitchen tools can also be bought. You can customize your kitchen setup to your liking, and you appear to be able to expand into the basement in the future. The visuals in this game are some very nice pixel art. The backgrounds are really where it shines. I especially like the interiors. There's a great attention to detail in set dressing. Things like exposed pipes and cracks and imperfections in the walls make it feel lived in and homey. Now, the Steam description of this game calls it a platformer, but I'm wary to go that far based on the demo. The platforming so far isn't really a challenge, it's just your means for exploring the world. There's one spot where there are spikes. Otherwise, the only danger is missing a jump and having to climb back up. That's fine. I think focusing on the cooking and story parts of the game makes sense. I'm just not sure referring to it as a platformer is the right call. But who knows, maybe platforming will be emphasized more as the game goes on, we'll just have to see. Overall, this is a cute, fun cooking and exploration game. That being said, I don't think it'll appeal to most Metroidvania fans. If you're interested in cozy games or know someone who is, I do recommend checking it out. Tales of Kenzera, Zao. This one is the only AAA I know of in the current batch of upcoming Metroidvanias. It's published by EA, and the creative lead, Abubakar Salim, previously played Bayek in Assassin's Creed Origins. Surgent Studios, who are developing the game, appear to have only worked on films up to this point, but the team for Zao includes many people experienced in game dev. Everything here is very polished. The art is beautiful, the gameplay is fluid, and the game is fully professionally voice acted.
Another obstruction! The gates, the spirits, the girl, now this stupid bridge!
First off, the story. You play as Zao, a young shaman who makes a deal with Kalunga, the god of death, to bring his father back to life. In order to do this, Zao must shepherd 3 great spirits across the Veil, which I'm going to take a wild guess means defeating them in boss battles. Zao is pretty brash, which is only made worse by his impatience to save his father. Kalunga takes on a mentorship role towards him, pushing Zao to slow down and think before he acts. The story so far is pretty straightforward, but there will likely be more plot and characters once we progress further. Progression in the demo is pretty linear. Things may open up more once you get past the early game, but we'll have to wait and see. There are side paths which contain collectibles and upgrades. Echoes, for example, will give a line or 2 of dialogue in some ulogi, which can be spent on skill upgrades. This triangle symbol marks an optional challenge route, which rewards the player with a trinket. Movement is good. You have a dash, double jump, and wall jump right off the bat. Everything flows together well. So far, the platforming is centered more around timing than precision inputs, so it's not as challenging as something like Hollow Knight. Near the end of the demo, you unlock a freeze ability, which allows Zao to freeze and climb waterfalls in order to backtrack and return to the bridge he fell from. I enjoyed the combat. You have 2 masks, which you can switch between for different combat styles. The Mask of the Moon has a ranged light attack and a melee heavy attack. The Spirit attack is this big laser beam. The Mask of the Sun is more focused on close combat, with a light attack combo and an uppercut heavy attack. The Spirit attack transforms Zao into a towering inferno of shamanistic fire. Spirit attacks consume spirit segments, which fill up when you hit enemies. You can also use spirit segments to heal, so during combat you have to decide on high damage versus healing. Because I prefer melee combat, I'm mostly stuck with the Mask of the Sun, but switching between them was pretty seamless and I ended up swapping mid-combat pretty often. The art is great, it's very colorful and stylish. The game is inspired primarily by Bantu culture. While I don't know much about that culture, the visuals all look very cohesive, and the world building has been pretty compelling so far. Performance-wise, this is the only game I've played so far where I did get occasional frame drops. Take that with a grain of salt, however, because I am playing on a GTX 1080. Overall, I think this game is super cool. It's very professional and polished, the story and style are shaping up nicely, and the gameplay is fluid. This is definitely one to check out once it releases in April. That's all 5 demos, so let's get on to the roundup. Zao is my highest recommendation of this batch. It's certainly the most polished and all-around high quality of the demos I've played so far. Kingsgrave was pretty simple but decently fun. AWAKEN Astral Blade is a maybe. It has a lot of flaws and was frustratingly difficult. but the combat system is decent and it has the potential to be fun for those looking for a challenge. Emberbane needs a lot of fixing before I can recommend it, but the developers are working on it, so keep an eye out if you're interested. Magical Delicacy is definitely not a Metroidvania, but it is a very cute, fun, cozy game, and I'd recommend it if you're interested in that genre. Thanks for watching, guys! 10 demos down, 20 more to go. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more. See you next time!